Welcome back, guys. You've made it through 2 lessons of your virtual learning this week. This is your Wit and Wisdom lesson for Wednesday, May 6th. We have made it through so much learning virtually together. I've been really thinking about all of you this week and missing everyone. I hope that you are all home safe and able to have fun. Maybe you've been swimming, it's been so hot outside, or you've been staying inside where it's nice and cool, but hopefully you are safe and able to still have some fun during your days when we are not able to be together. I can't wait to see all of you again when it's safe. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see what we're going to do today. Let's see, I'm getting pretty quick at the technology thing. About the time that we won't need it anymore, I will be very good at this virtual learning recording of our lessons. It's much easier when we can just do this in person, but we will get through this together, right? All right, so what do you need for today? You need your paper or notebook and a pencil. You're going to need your learning partner, and you're going to need a quiet space to concentrate. If you need to take a minute and make sure that you are ready to listen and do your very best work, you can pause the video and come back when you're ready to work. Just press play. What are we going to work on today? So today, by the end of our class, you will be able to identify the characters, the setting, the problem and resolution in the story Bone, Button, Borscht that we read the other day. Okay, you're going to be able to recount the story details to your learning partners. So when I say recount, we've done this lots of times throughout the year. Recount is kind of a fancy word for saying retell. So tell me the details of the story. What happened first, next, then, and last in our story. So this little picture reminds me of a community. We've been thinking on these two books with Stone Soup and Bone, Button, Borscht about how the food nourishes a community. So we said food nourishes our body by giving us energy and keeping us healthy, but what does food do for a community? It kind of goes a little deeper than just keeping your stomach full. A community is a group of people who share a connection, such as where they live or what they enjoy. I want you to read this question with me one more time. Ready? Here we go. How does food nourish a community? I want you to read it on your own. I want you to read it to your learning partner. Very good. I'm sure you did wonderful. So something you may have been wondering, when we read Bone, Button, Borscht, what was the bone? You might be thinking, some of you might have had that even as a wonder on your questions. I don't remember hearing anything about bones. He put in the soup buttons and he put vegetables and the people ate the soup, but I don't remember hearing about any bones. So the bones were actually the buttons. So in olden times, before we had plastic, and it was really easy and everything, most of our buttons are made of plastic now. Buttons were often made out of bones of animals. So they would call them bone buttons. So if you remember in the end, they gave him some metal buttons for his coat so they could keep the bone buttons. The buttons were actually the bones. So if that was a wonder for you, that you might be able to check that off your list as something that you were able to answer. Okay, so today we're going to examine more closely the details. So put on your detective hat. We're going to examine a little more closely some of these things in our story. So we're going to think more closely about the characters. Who are the main characters in the story? What is the setting? So if you remember yesterday, we looked at the painting and we talked about the setting of the painting. So today we're going to think about the setting of the book that we read, Bone, Button, Borscht. That's like a tongue twister. Say that 3 times fast if you can. Okay, and we're going to think about what was the action or the problem. What was the problem in the story, and did it have a solution? Sometimes problems don't always have a solution in our story. Okay, so I have a little video that's going to read us a few of the pages so we can look at this more closely. And then we will talk about it when that part is over. We don't need the whole thing, so let me find.
Where is the bone in the
Oh
story?
my goodness gracious. While I find this part in the story, I want you to be thinking about the community part of this story. Who were some of the people that were in the community of the townspeople? And who are some of the people that are in your community? So, our community, we could say, is Buckeye, Arizona. What are some people or jobs of people that are in our community? So, pause your video and tell your learning partner a few of the jobs in our community that you can think of. I am thinking of someone in our community that helps keeps us safe and puts out fires. So I was thinking firefighters are a part of our community. What are some other things that you can think of in our community? Okay, here we go. Let's watch our video for today.
The entire thing. I'm only going to read parts of it, but you can listen to it again by clicking on the read aloud link below the video. I'm going to read the parts that help you listen for the story elements: setting, characters, actions and problem, and the ending. First, let's listen for the setting. That's where the story takes place. As he walked downhill, small, shadowy houses slowly took shape on his left and his right. Fine, he said. Now I see the town. But where are the lights? Where are the people? He knocked on a door. Turn to your learning partner and whisper where the story takes place, or the setting of the story. Did you say in a town? Great work. Now, let's listen for the characters in this passage. The beggar went to another house and knocked. Please help me. I'm hungry and cold. Go away, called a voice from within. Just let me in, for a few minutes even. No, go away. So the beggar moved on from house to house and door to door, but no one would help him. What is wrong with these people? He wondered. You don't have to make this chart. We'll work on it together. We've already discussed the setting is in the town. I've added that to our notes. Now let's discuss who are the characters in the story. Try to think of at least two. Talk with your learning partner now. Did you talk about the beggar? Did you also think of the townspeople? I know that it's not just one character, but instead it's a group of people. There's another character in the book not described in the passage we read. Can you remember who that might be? It is the shamus. He's the caretaker of the synagogue. Great job remembering. In the last passage, we learned that the beggar is starving or hungry. This is the problem he's facing. And we also learned that none of the townspeople will answer his knocks on the door. What problem do the townspeople have? Let's listen to another passage and learn more about the problem the townspeople have. Oi! If only I had one more button. Finally, the shaman spoke. Look, mister, I won't give you a button. Nobody in this town will give you a button. Why not? Asked the beggar. Because we're poor, Mr. Baker. We don't give to each other anymore. So why should we give even a button to a stranger? Why? Asked the beggar. Because with one more button, I could make us a soup. I could make us a nice hot borscht. That's ridiculous, scoffed the shamus. Impossible. Nobody makes borscht from buttons. What did you learn about the problem the townspeople have? Pause the video now and talk with your learning partner. I learned that the townspeople don't share with each other anymore. Because they have so little, they don't want to share, especially not with a beggar who is a stranger. This is a problem for the beggar because he needs to eat. Let's listen to a part of the book that happens a little later. What actions happen so that the beggar and townspeople solve their problem? Listen closely. The beggar stirred, then he stopped. He looked at the people, he looked at the pot. He looked at the people again, then shook his head. You got problems, Mr. Beggar? Asked the shamus. The beggar frowned. Wait, said the shamus. He ran to a cupboard and brought back a bulb of garlic. Would this help, Mr. Beggar? He asked. Why not? Laughed the beggar. Mr. Beggar, I've got some carrots, someone said. And I've got beets, called another. I've got onions. I've got beans. Would these help, Mr. Beggar? They asked. What actions did you hear the beggar and townspeople take? Pause the video and talk with your learning partner now. Did you talk about how, little by little, the beggar tricks the townspeople into giving their vegetables to add to the soup? One person gives garlic, one person gives carrots, another gives beets. The borscht starts looking and smelling yummy. Now, we need to listen for how the story ends. I'm going to read 2 short parts of the text so that we can remember how it ends. Here's the first. Then the people raised their arms. They rolled their eyes toward heaven and they cried out, Delicious! Perfectly delicious! This is the best borscht we've ever tasted! The little beggar did it! He made borscht out of buttons! It's a miracle! And then, this is what happens at the very end. The feast is over and eventually the beggar leaves. Listen for what happens at the very end. The years passed. One by one, the beggar's bone buttons were lost. But it's a strange thing, a wonder, perhaps. The townsfolk learned that they didn't really need the buttons. They learned to make borscht without them. And they learned to help one another without borscht, even in hard times. That was the real miracle the beggar left behind. How did the story end? Pause the video and talk with your learning partner. Did you think about how the townspeople all shared the borscht and had a good time? And then after the beggar left, the townspeople kept sharing with each other? Even though the beggar tricked the townspeople into making him soup, he also taught them how to share with each other as a community. Look, we finished filling in our chart. Great work. Now let's put our story elements to good use. This says, in the story, Bone Button Borscht takes place in blank. The characters in the story are blank. The problem is blank. In the end, blank. I want you to practice this with your learning partner, but be sure to fill in the blanks. Pause the video now to recount the story. I'm so curious about what you put in the blanks. Maybe you said the Bone Button Borscht story takes place in a town, a village, or a synagogue. All of those would have worked. The characters in the story are, did you put the beggar, the shamus, the townspeople, or all 3? The problem is, I'm curious about how you answered this. In the end, again, We could tell a lot about the ending. Stand up and safely jump up and down for being so efficient with recounting stories. Now that we've used the story elements to help us recount the text, let's dig into some details. To understand the text better, we need to learn to pay attention to the details that the author provides about the different story elements. Let's explore why recounting details from a read aloud is important to understand the book better. I'm going to reread a sentence from Bone Button Borscht. Listen closely. What details do you learn about the beggar? One dark winter's night, a ragged little beggar hobbled along a lonely road. The bold words ragged, little, and hobbled are the details the author provides about the beggar. These details help us, the reader, imagine what the character looks like. What does ragged mean? Ragged means the beggar is wearing rags or clothing that is old or falling apart. What does hobbled mean? Hobbled means that the beggar is walking in an odd way because he might be old or injured. Now you try. Please listen carefully for details about the beggar as I read from the book. When you hear a detail that helps you imagine the beggar, put a thumb up. As he walked downhill, small shadowy houses slowly took shape on his left and his right. Fine, he said, now I see the town, but where are the lights? Where are the people? He knocked on a door. Please, a little food for a poor starving beggar, he cried. His face appeared in the frosty window, then vanished. There were footsteps and then silence. Did you hear details about the beggar such as poor, starving? Let's look at the next page. The beggar went to another house and knocked. Please help me. I'm hungry and cold. Go away, called the voice from within. Just let me in for a few minutes even. No, go away. So the beggar moved on from house to house, door to door, but no one would help him. What's wrong with these people? He wondered. Did you hear details about the beggar such as hungry and cold? Give yourself a pat on the back if you did. Let's practice together as we listen to details about the townspeople. Again, when you hear a detail about the townspeople, put your thumb up. Remember, listening for and recounting details can help you imagine the story as you listen. Finally, the shaman spoke. Look, mister, I won't give you a button. Nobody in this town will give you a button. Why not? Asked the beggar. Because we're poor, Mr. Beggar. We don't give to each other anymore. So why should we give a button to a stranger? Why? Asked the beggar. Because with one more button, I could make us a soup. I could make us a nice, hot borscht. That's ridiculous, scoffed the shaman. Impossible. Nobody makes button for borscht. Nobody makes borscht from buttons. Talk with your learning partner. What details helped you imagine what the townspeople were like? Pause the video now to share with your learning partner what details from the text helped you know what the townspeople are like. You might have shared that they were poor, that they don't give to each other, and even how the shaman said it was impossible can give us more information about the townspeople because he's also part of the townspeople. Great work! Do you see how rereading for details can help you understand a book even better? I hope so. I know it helps me. Today, we focused on what is happening in Bone Button Borscht. First, we identified the big story elements, such as the story, characters, problem, action, and ending. Then we went back and reread for even more detail. After all our work, I hope you can recount the story and tell it to your learning partner. And I hope you add some details that you heard in the story.
Okay, So now that we have looked at some details, you will have a chance to use some of these details.
To end our lesson today, we're going to practice reading.
Sorry. In your exit ticket for today, I have a couple pages that we read today from our book, and you can use those to help answer. There's just a few comprehension questions about the story of Bone Button Borscht. And I put the pictures in there so you can look at the pictures and some of those words to help you refresh your memory. So make sure while you're answering those questions, you go back and read those pages because they will help you answer the questions. Your very last thing for today as well, for your homework, I want you to practice reading your fluency passage again. So if you remember, fluency is your worksheet 10A. I want you to be doing option A this week. Okay, so let's read through this once together, and then you will read it a couple more times to your learning partner. So let's read this together. Here we go. So we're going to chorally read, which means we're reading together. So here we go. Follow my arrow on the screen. The beggar counted the buttons. There were 5. Boy, if I only had one more button, he said. The shamus said nothing. Boy, if I only had one more button. Still the shamus was silent. Boy, if only I had one more button. Finally the shamus spoke. Look, mister, I won't give you a button. Nobody in this town will give you a button. Why not? Asked the beggar. Because we're poor, Mr. Beggar. We don't give to each other any more. Okay. One thing before we went on our break that we had been talking about were adjectives. So I was wondering if you could find a couple of adjectives in this passage. Are there any adjectives that you can find? Remember, an adjective describes a noun. Could you find the word poor? The poor was describing how the townspeople were. How about an interjection? So we learned that an interjection was like a sound like wow or bang or maybe like oi. Oi would be an interjection because he's making a sound. He's like, oi, if I only had one more button, right? That is an interjection. All right, make sure you practice this passage a couple more times today. Complete your exit ticket. Put your hands in your air and give yourself a cheer today for working so hard. And thank your learning partner for being with you along this time when we are not together in our classroom. And we talked about reading the handout a few more times. So read your fluency passage and practice for phrasing. All right. I hope that you guys have a nice rest of your day. If you need to get in touch with me, here is my email. I check it throughout the day so we can get in touch if we need me. I will see you later. Have a good rest of your day, second grade.